Welcome back, Fright Night friends, to another exciting episode where today we're breaking down Doctor Sleep. It's a sequel to The Shining that we did last season. We're gonna talk about what we thought about it. Sometimes we agreed, sometimes we didn't. We're gonna talk about all the callbacks, or most of them, and then we're gonna see what Stephen King thought about it. So sit back, listen in, and here we go.
Chris, do you think I can use my shining to control our listeners? You will enjoy this episode. This is Scary Movie Fright Night,
a podcast about two guys who just watch scary movies. I'm Chris, and I love scary movies.
And I'm Sam, and I hate scary movies. My body just showed, give me the heebie-jeebies. No, don't. All you have to do is stay inside in your bed, and then you won't get murdered.
Oh.
Okay. Now you have that recorded.
So here we are. This week's theme was movies based on another Stephen King novel. And as mentioned, we watched the sequel to The Shining, Doctor Sleep, which Sam might tell you that he didn't realize the movie was going to be so long. So he was a little Dr. Sleepy. Whereas I watched it early in the day and it did not make me Dr. Sleepy. But
Chris, can you shine? Do you have the shine?
I can see. Well, so a couple things. I have a bald head, so it's very reflective.
I have some shine,
and so light shines off of it.
Yeah. Can you tell if I'm shining?
Yeah. Yep. Because your lighting's bad, so it makes you look a little shiny. Sam, do you want to tell people?
Yeah. Yes. Let me tell you who was in this movie.
Yeah.
And then we'll do the recap. So Doctor Sleep came out in 2019. It was directed by Mike Flanagan, and it was written by Mike Flanagan and Stephen King, based on the book by Stephen King, Doctor Sleep. Starring Ewan McGregor, Rebecca Ferguson, and Kylie Curran. IMDb gave it a 7.3 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes didn't have a critic score, but an 89% audience score. So what happened in this movie?
Well, Sam, let me tell you, even though I'm pretty sure you watched it, but you have a tendency to scroll and fall asleep. So I'm going to remind you. So the movie opened and we immediately, and I don't know if you caught this or not, but we hear the dreadful music from the original Shining. And right off the bat, I was like, that's the music. Like, movie over. I stopped it and I was done because I was like, oh, call back to The Shining. Great movie. I loved it. We then cut to a young Danny Torrance, and he's traumatized from his family's ordeal at the Overlook Hotel. It turns out he's being followed by the ghosts at the Overlook. But then we see the ghost of Dick Halloran. He shows up, teaches him how to capture the ghosts in psychic lockboxes. I thought they did a pretty good job overall recasting those characters, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, so fast forward to 2011. Danny is now Dan, and he's played by Ewan McGregor. He's not a Jedi. He's not Obi-Wan Kenobi, but he still has the shine. However, he's become an alcoholic, like his father. But then he just up and just says, I'm going to get out of here. He moves to New Hampshire. He goes to Alcoholics Anonymous. He becomes a hospice orderly. He meets a nice cat. They become friends. And then he uses his shining to help comfort dying patients. And that's actually where he gets the name Dr. Sleep.
Oh, I missed that. I totally didn't even understand why the movie was called Dr. Sleep.
Yeah. So he walked in the first room, followed the cat, and then the guy woke up and said, oh, the cat means I'm going to die. And then he kept calling him Doc, which we know is his nickname. So we don't, so there was a thing there. And then he said, I'm not a doctor. And the guy laughed. He's like, haha, Dr. Sleep. To move on, so we also separately, in a different scene, meet a young girl named Abra, who is a super powerful shiner, maybe even stronger than Dan. And she telepathically reaches out to Dan, and the two form a psychic friendship, like they're like psychic friendship pen pals. So that's fun. Meanwhile, we also meet a third group of people. So they're a cult of psychic vampires, which is actually what it said online, but also my best assessment of what they were. And we'll talk more about why they gave that vampire vibe a little bit later.
They were giving like a steampunk vibe, kind of, maybe. Or maybe just the hat made me think of that.
Steampunk.
Oh, yeah, vampire. Steam, because that's what they were eating.
The steam. Ooh, I wonder if that's why it's a steam. yeah, that hat. It was also questionable, but like she seemed very protective of that hat. Also, it was part of her name. So was she? Which came first, Rose or the hat? I don't know.
Hmm.
But this group of psychic vampires, they call themselves a True Knot, and they're led by the woman Rose the Hat, and they feed on, as mentioned, steam, which is kind of like the psychic life essence within people who shine, right? And when you torture them, when you kill them, when you cause them pain and fear, then it makes it even stronger. And so we see them kidnap a boy and then torture and kill the boy slowly, and her and all her, steampunky True Knot psychic vampires absorb the steam from the boy. And it's actually pretty gruesome because, there's not a lot of movies where you see this happen to like children. And I think that
Yeah.
like it's pretty crazy.
That's a thing.
Obviously they don't show in great detail, but
I didn't like that. I
What?
wrote that down as one of the things I didn't like was harming children.
Yeah, I knew either you would really like it or not at all.
One or the other.
One or the other. I'm glad you leaned in that direction though. So one last point while they're killing the boy and steaming him up, Abra somehow senses it happening, and she sees it happening and she's freaking out. So Rose senses her there, and so Rose ends up going after Abra, but then realizes how powerful she is when Rose herself gets physically injured by a trap set by Abra, and half of her hand gets ripped off. So Rose then sends her team after Abra and her super steam. So Rose stays behind because she doesn't want Abra to know she's coming. Also, Abra tells Dan, this boy was killed, red rum on his wall, call back to the original. Dan, I need your help. This boy's dead. They connect. She tells him all about it. She catches the bus and talks to him. You get the point. But Dan recruits his friend, Billy, who's his bestie, and they go meet up with Abra and devise a plan. So after tricking all of the True Knot vampire folks, except for Rose, because she wasn't there, Dan and Billy actually end up killing almost all of them. But unfortunately, Billy gets shot in the face because he's made to kill himself because this stupid young lady tells him to do it, and she has power over him, and it's very unfortunate.
That made me sad.
That was very sad. It was very sad. Like, he was a good character. He was a good man. He
Yeah.
helped Dan through his thing. So that was very unfortunate. Like, you kind of saw it coming maybe, but because she was the one that she was the pusher, she had the ability to make someone do it, and she had just that. Yeah. Anyway, very sad. But meanwhile, what we find out is that Rose's partner, Crow Daddy, which is a strange name,
Yeah.
but
I was confused by the name. He was the Crow, but she would call him Crow Daddy, and which made me think of like a crawdad. It just didn't make sense.
Oh, yeah. Crow Daddy, because he would. I don't really get it. Anyway, I don't really understand their names, Rose the Hat, Crow Daddy. But either way, Crow Daddy actually goes to Abra's house, which is where she actually is, even though she had tricked them to think that she was with Dan. And he kidnaps her and kills her father. Dan uses the shine to find Abra, possesses her, saves her from Crow Daddy, and he ends up dying too. Now Rose is freaking out. She's like, I'm done. I'm the last of my group. She absorbs all the steam from all these bottles they had stored up to make herself super powerful. And here, Sam, let me tell you, because I'm still pretending you didn't watch it, this is when it gets probably the most interesting because it's a Shining movie. And we'll talk about this later because I think I have a theory about, we've talked a lot about sequels. I think this is part of what made this such a good sequel. So Dan, in that moment, is like, there's only one place that I can take Abra where we might be able to overpower Rose the Hat, and that's the Overlook Hotel. Someone somewhere hungrier for the shine than Rose is. As they drive up to the hotel, we see the camera flying over the lake in the same manner as the opening of the original movie. We're going to talk about that later. And we also see the car driving through the mountains, just like it did in the original movie, which we'll talk about that later. And we get the same original music from The Shining playing. It's all just one big reminder that we're watching a sequel to The Shining. So they finally get up to the building. Dan goes inside. He's like, gotta wake up old Overlook. Walks in, goes to the boiler room, says, wakey, wakey. Eggs and bakey. Abra standing outside in the cold. I don't know why she's not colder, but it's cool. It's snowing, whatever. She's like, cool, let's build a snowman. At the same time, though, he has visions of walking up to the bar just like his father did in the first one. And he's talking to Lloyd, the bartender, but this time, Lloyd is his father.
I'm sure that was important, but it was not one of my favorite parts of the movie. The whole like bar scene. I was like, we could cut that out.
I think it was important to show that his father's spirit was still there, being
Mm,
held captive by the hotel.
mm,
I think that like just the way that he was there and the previous caretaker was the bartender, it just kind of like played into the circle of like, this is the circle of the hotel.
yeah.
And so even though his father was like, no, you're Grady or whatever, and he was like, no, I'm Lloyd. And so it was just very that same play into it. But then when Danny like confronted him a little bit and kind of shook him loose a little bit, and then he was like, oh, it's and then a little bit of that like evil father came out just a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
I have
I don't know.
questions
I thought it was
about that,
interesting.
but we can come back to it after you finish the plot.
Oh, oh, you mean I'm still telling you about the story?
Yeah.
Okay. So finally, Rose shows up. They face off. More callbacks. All the rooms are same rooms that we know from the original. And unfortunately, Rose overpowers Dan, but he saves himself by releasing all the ghosts that he's put in lockboxes over the years, and they devour her. Following that, and channeling a full Jack Torrance, Dan gets possessed and starts chasing Abra through the hotel, yelling her name, holding an axe, but regains himself just long enough to let her go, and she lets whatever the entity is inside him know. Well, Dan Torrance went to the boiler room first, and guess what he did? He's going to make this place blow up. So Abra finally escapes the hotel. It goes up in flames. Sometime later, we see Abra talking to Dan's spirit, who comforts her, telling her to shine on. We then see Abra encounter the woman ghost from room 237, just like young Dan did as a child. She goes into the bathroom, turns around, closes the door behind her, just as Danny did, and the movie closes. I don't know
There
what
were
that means.
things about this movie that I really liked, and there were also
Mhm.
things about this movie that I really didn't like. I had kind of like
Interesting.
conflicting thoughts about it. What about you?
I think I liked the whole movie. I think because I watched The Shining when I was 3 years old,
Yeah.
which has nothing to do with it. It's not like I remember it. But I think particularly because, back in season 1, we watched The Shining. It was one of our earliest episodes. And so I had seen this movie before, but watching it again after, so recently watching the original and then obviously doing a little bit of a deep dive that we did, or like we do a little bit every episode, I just thought I really enjoyed it. I guess to talk about what I appreciated so much is that you and I have talked a lot about sequels, and we watched Talk to Me, and they're making a Talk to Me sequel, and I'm like, man, I really hope they do it well. Sequels are hard. Sequels are hard, particularly in horror movies where they've got to be captivating. They've got to be in the same universe. They've got to one up the previous, but not too much. But they got to maintain the rules. And so even though The Shining didn't, there wasn't a ton of depth to it. Um, I like the points that I thought what made this such a good sequel is so you bring back the original characters. We talked about that in the sequel to Train to Busan, right? Like, oh, if the daughter would have come back and been grown up, we automatically are connected, right? So they open up by casting someone that looks like Danny Torrance and casting someone that looks like his mother Wendy, or at least like does a pretty good vocal impression of her,
Yeah.
to say the least. So they bring back those characters, and we get an immediate follow on from the end of the first movie. Same universe, same rules, but they completely expand it into a whole new story. There's more people that can shine. We learn about them, and we learn that like it's bigger than this one experience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
they
he
explained it
explained
a
what
little
The
bit.
Shining even is. Like in the first movie, I was
Yep.
like, what is The Shining? I don't even know. I mean, they
Yeah.
kind of talked about it, but there was no explanation. Nor was it, I also felt like in the original, in The Shining, the bad guy is Jack Torrance. But I didn't really understand what was happening to him. He's just kind of goes
Yeah.
mad in this
The
hotel.
hotel was the bad.
Yeah, the
was the
hotel
bad
like
guy. Yeah.
possesses him or something. But it was just,
And it makes him the
it was like a series of horrific images, but we didn't really
Mhm.
understand why or what. Whereas in this movie, they almost over rotate on explaining the mechanics of what The Shining is and the steam and why they use it and all this kind of
That's fair.
stuff. But I was like, okay, we're getting a little more here. There's something for me
Yeah.
to grab onto.
Well, and I actually don't know that I agree about The Shining. I think that, any good possession movie, I'm trying to think, there's another movie that we watched. I mean, like The Conjuring, the mom gets possessed by the spirit, and then there's the moment where she's able to like overpower it and win over, kind of like Dan Torrance does at the end of this movie, where he gets to take control of himself just long enough to get Abra out of there.
Yeah.
There's another one that I'm thinking of. Maybe it'll come to me, but I felt like we knew that this place was bad, and maybe it's because I grew up on a culture of understanding The Shining and The Overlook, so I went in relatively biased, right, or relatively understanding of the storyline.
Hmm.
But I thought there was, he's being driven mad by these spirits, and you're right, we don't really know. Is it one spirit inside of him? There was a lot that we didn't understand. Was he a reincarnation? There were
Did he
all
have the
those other.
shining, the
Well,
shine?
I knew he didn't, but that was a question you brought up.
Yeah.
But because he never showed any sort of like psychic ability.
Right.
Yeah, but you're right. This definitely like answered any outgoing questions, even the Tony thing, right? They said, well, Tony was his manifestation of his power, and so they sealed up any wounds that might have been left by the
Yeah.
original.
Yeah, that's a good way of
Um,
putting it.
yeah. But anyway, so new concepts, new villains, right? So they brought in a completely different set of villains, new story built on the foundation. And then I think what also like made it a good sequel is the amount of parallels and callbacks, but not crazy. So like there were some callbacks throughout and some parallels with Dan and his and like I'd read one article that talked about his emotional grief, and part of it was his trauma and building through his trauma. And when he's standing up there at his AA meeting and he's like, my father never would have got here. This is where he always wanted to be. Now I
Mm.
feel like I knew who he was by knowing myself when I was drunk, but now I know who he wanted to be. So there was some trauma
Mm.
dealt with in there.
Mhm.
I'm really rabbit holing, but and then like parallels, callbacks, and then at the end it just kind of brings it full circle because Dick is saying, "Hey, like I'm still here talking to you because it's my responsibility. You're gonna be that for someone." And at the end, now he's that for Abra. He's showing her how to lock them in boxes because she's the next best super gifted shine person that maybe won't grow up to be jacked up and become an alcoholic and crazy like he did, and then have to wait until that to fix it. Like he's now her like spirit guide.
Yeah.
Um, but that's why I appreciated it for what it was. I mean, we can
Yeah.
talk more detail
Yeah.
about like the ins and outs of it, but that's why I was satisfied.
Okay, that's fair. I wanted to know what Stephen King thought of the movie. Since we
Yeah,
talked about this in our episode of The Shining, that he didn't like Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of The
right.
Shining. And in making this movie, there were some agreements that by the studios that they wanted it to connect to the original The Shining,
Yep.
but they
Because you had to
also
draw in those audiences, right? Like
right,
people that
right.
saw the original.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
and I guess there was another TV series, a Shining TV series that came out in like
they
the
did.
90s. But
Yep,
it did
and it was
it was
book accurate.
closer
Yeah.
to, yeah, it was book accurate. So I think that was probably Stephen King's uh probably preferred the TV adaptation over the
Yeah,
movie.
I think he wrote part of it. I think he was highly involved in that.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Um, but for making this, they were like, no, we want it to tie to the Shining movie because that's what people know. That's what became iconic. It's like you said, when you hear the music, people are like, oh yeah, that's the music from The Shining. So
Mhm.
there was kind of this expectation that they use elements from the movie, but like you said, they did a nice job of like making it its own thing. So I
Mhm.
definitely saw the connections. I felt like the style was very similar, like the tone and things down to like at the start of the movie they had the detail from the tiles on the floor in the hotel that like
Yeah,
faded into
yeah.
the screen. Like just there were many nods to the film, but there were also some nods to the Shining book that like
Right,
plugged the
right.
holes. Did you read any of these?
I saw a little bit, but I'm curious to see what you found.
So for
I mean, I
example,
think there's one big thing I'm tracking, but what did you find?
Well, like the destruction of the hotel. So in the end of the
Yeah.
book,
Yeah.
the hotel is destroyed. In the end of the Shining book, and then in Doctor Sleep, they go back to the site of the hotel, but the hotel has
Mhm.
already been destroyed, and it was
Right.
destroyed when Jack Torrance he remembered that he forgot to turn off the boiler or something.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's what they used, the whole boiler room thing, and destroyed the hotel in a out of kind of a homage to the book, the
It's like
Shining book.
righting the wrong of what,
Yes.
didn't happen in the first movie. Yeah.
Right, right. What was the other thing? Or this was a key difference actually from the Doctor Strange book, not Doctor Strange, Doctor Sleep,
Doctor Strange.
is that Dan Torrance lives in the book, dies in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I did read that. That was a divert. Like it's also funny. It's like they just like killing everyone off. They killed off
Yeah,
Dick
what
in
the
the
heck?
first one, but then because in the first one, right, Dick dies, but he kind of in the book, Dick lives on and he kind of
Yeah,
helps them get through their life, which I think that was a course correction here, where Dick was still there to kind of help him,
right,
but as a spirit, and that's how
right.
they. That's and honestly, like like you gotta everything else aside, you gotta kind of hand it to them for taking the book and trying to make it book accurate for Doctor Sleep, but also taking the movie and blending the two together
Yeah,
to make it this like puzzle piece fit of a sequel
right.
that doesn't feel clinky. It doesn't feel like they threw something in there to just be like, oh well, the book said this, and but it didn't work, right?
Yeah,
Because the movie said something else, and so they did a pretty good job, I think, of just kind of making it felt normal. If we weren't reading into it, it would have just felt like
yeah,
any other sequel that was well planned out.
yeah. I think so.
How many callbacks did you catch? I made a list of all the
Oh my
callbacks that I
gosh.
caught, and then I also Googled it to see like there was a lot of really subtle ones. I didn't bother making note of those because there's a lot of just like super weird ones that you won't necessarily notice unless you read about it.
Yeah.
But there were a lot.
There was a few there's definitely a few I noticed, and there was some that I read about as well. Like one that came to mind is when they're in the office of when he's going to get a job at the hospice facility.
No, that's when he met with the doctor who he gave the watch back to.
That's what it was. Where was that doctor?
Yeah,
How did he?
in his doctor's office, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, he met him through AA. That's what it was.
Yeah,
There was
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot. There was a lot happening in this movie. Like it was 2.5 hours, and like just it was a lot. It was a lot of plot. Anyway,
It was a lot. Yeah,
so
a lot of plot.
he goes to this doctor's office, and I was like, that doctor's office very much resembles the office of when in The Shining, when Jack Torrance is like interviewing for the position at the hotel.
Yep. Yep. I didn't really catch that. I felt something there, but I didn't catch what it was. But yeah, you're right. Like the office is almost
Almost
identical. Yeah.
exact. I didn't see this while I was watching it, but I read that there's a point where he's reading a magazine. I think it's a Playboy magazine, and it's the
Oh,
same
yeah.
magazine that his dad was reading
Yep.
in The Shining. Did you
Yeah, I
catch
didn't
that?
see that either, but I also read
You
that
read
as well.
that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't see it, but I read that, yeah.
What were some other ones? There was obviously the things that you see, like seeing the maze and seeing, when they're
Sure,
running through
sure.
the maze and anything at the hotel. You're like, okay, well, we've seen these places in the hotel, the room number,
Yeah.
the beginning when he's like riding on his bike, and especially the sound effect of riding over. In fact, I was like,
Yep.
did they pull is this actual footage that they're reusing? The only footage
It,
they reused was the
yep.
flyby over the lake and the
Hmm.
flyby with the car driving up the
With the
mountain towards the
car.
hotel. Everything else
Did
was
you catch
recreated.
that? Did you catch those scenes?
I was I read later that those were the only ones that were
Yeah.
reused. But when
Yeah.
I saw it, I was like, wow, they did a really nice job of getting that exact island and the exact lake
Yep.
with the exact like. And of course, it's because it is the same shot.
Yeah, I didn't expect it to be the same shot. I did, and here, I mean, I'll go through my list real quick.
Yeah.
These are the callbacks that I caught going through the movie, but I definitely caught those scenes as like, oh, this is the opening. When they're driving up, and to the Overlook. But I didn't expect it to be the same scenes. I just thought they recreated it,
Yeah.
but they just made it nighttime and made it look sharper or whatever. But okay, so callbacks that I kind of noted. alcoholism and violence. I mean, that's kind of a through point to the
Sure,
movie. That's
sure.
not really like, the music we talked about. Obviously all the characters, the Overlook, blah. Okay, got it. Dan putting his face through the hole in the door in the bathroom.
Yeah,
Just like his father did.
yeah.
At the Here's Johnny
I
piece.
loved the
Lloyd the
Shelley
bartender.
Duvall recreation, by the way. The
Yeah,
actress,
they did a really good job.
even like her ears poking through her hair, I was
Yeah.
like, oh,
Well, I mean, I think the best recreation scene was when she's running across the park after little
yeah,
Danny Torrance
yeah.
is
Where
talking,
did you
and
go?
she does the voice
Yeah,
almost perfectly. Like if you weren't watching, you would probably think it was Shelley Duvall.
yeah. The first time we see her on the screen, I did like a double take, and I was like, Shelley Duvall, is that you, girl?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. It was an interesting choice too. I guess the one recast that I wasn't like super sold on was the Jack Torrance recast.
Yeah,
Because it's like it's Jack Nicholson, so we know, like, I mean, this dude's a huge actor. He's been around for a very long time, but also actors have been doing impressions of this guy forever. He didn't have that swag. I don't know if this is the right term. He didn't
yeah.
have that feel. And Jack Nicholson has a very interesting voice and feel about himself, a suaveness, maybe.
Can we chat about that bar
And
scene for a second? In The Shining, that
yeah,
scene made me uncomfortable. Like, I remember being particularly like disturbed by his like kind of derangedness when he's sitting there at the bar scene. So when we come back to
yeah,
the bar this time, I was like almost had a little bit of a sense of dread about it. And
interesting,
then as we were watching it,
interesting.
I mean, I get what they were doing, right? Like he was being tempted
Yeah,
with
yeah.
alcohol and the whole thing about like this is your medicine for dealing with your shitty kids or whatever. Like it's uncomfortable. I think in The Shining, that's the moment where you see
Yeah.
him like kind of being a jerk and you're like, this is
Yeah.
weird. So I get why it's there,
Yeah.
but I was like, oh, is this really necessary? I don't like
Yeah.
this part. You know what I mean?
Interesting that it made you so uncomfortable. I'm trying to that's curious. Like one of the things that I did talk about, I actually didn't mention this. But one of the things that I had read somewhere that, and I touched on it a little bit with like the trauma, like the
Yeah.
trauma of his childhood and how that fed into him kind of recreating that and having this alcoholic and violent tendencies. One of the things I had read talked about like that being there because that was like his final step was facing his father, because he had faced his
Mm,
father through alcoholism and violence. He had faced his father or his internal struggle with his father through, his sobriety and then overcoming that. And so in that moment, like when he's yelling at him, he's like, "Don't you know?" And he like, but it's just the spirit is like whatever it is. And so there, I think that what they were trying to get, that was his like that was his chance to finally, he has become his own
mm,
man. He has done it right. He's become effectively a hero. And then not knowing that he's going to die, but before he dies, he gets to face off with the person who has been effectively caused him trauma for the entirety of his life.
mm,
Even if even if a good, the obviously chasing him around and all that was based on the hotel, or the hotel fed into that. But obviously, you remember he had had some sort of violence with Danny as a child before that. So anyway,
yeah,
I get what you're saying. It didn't have to be there, especially if they didn't really cast an actor who
yeah,
really felt like Jack Torrance. But
yeah. What were some of the other connections that you had, or the callbacks to The Shining?
just a few more. So we talked about Lloyd the bartender. Duh, we just talked about it. This one I caught immediately, and I also read about it because I do have an article here that Ranker put out that they talk about the subtle callbacks. When Rose gets in the Overlook, and Dan is at the top of the stairs and he's holding the axe, and Rose is walking up and her hands are up and she's like trying to talk him down.
Yeah.
It was like the same exact stance and like feel
Oh,
as
yeah.
when Jack is walking up and Shelley Duvall's holding the baseball bat. She's like, get back, get back. And he's just like, trying to talk her down. It was very
Mm,
like, it felt the same. And I read about that. They staged it to be
mm,
almost identical, frame shot, etc. And then right after that, she overpowers him and throws him down the stairs, just like his father got sent down the stairs, right? So it was very, that whole scene was very constructed to be, almost identical. And then obviously as Ewan McGregor, man, well done, as he's running in the hallway with the limp, yelling, "Hey, bro!" and he's got the axe in his hand. Like, I mean, that was obviously, a direct imitation of what we saw his father do. Just a couple other things that came from this Ranker article that I mentioned. So you already called out the shot over the water. You already called out the interview with the doctor. Good job taking all my content. The original actor that played Danny had a bit part when the baseball kid got kidnapped.
Yeah.
And they were at the baseball game, and the two guys were talking about like, oh, he just reads the pitcher's mind. He's so good. One of those two guys was the guy who played the original Danny Torrance.
No way.
Yep. This one is funny. I wanted to go back and re-listen, but when Dan is driving up to the Overlook Hotel with Abra in his car, and he like runs over a speed bump or something, they overlaid the original mix of the tricycle sound into the car shot, so that it felt like him driving up to the hotel in a car. It was like they overlaid the sound of him like riding the tricycle as a kid.
Yeah.
Just to give it, a subtle feel.
Interesting.
The set was built from the exact same blueprints from Kubrick's film, which makes sense, but they pulled the same blueprints and rebuilt it to the T. And then we already talked about the ending of the movie, being the like, finally the Overlook burns down and that. But yeah.
I am a little disappointed we never got to find out what was in the pantry of the abandoned hotel.
You know what? Where was a large can of fruit cocktail?
We spent a long time. We spent a long time analyzing that scene on the episode, and this time we didn't get to find out what's in the pantry.
Because no one got like locked in the freezer or anything. Actually, you know what? I'm changing. I liked this movie, but now
losing points.
They didn't do it.
I really liked the whole mind connection thing. Did you ever see that show Sense8?
No, but I've seen that it exists.
Yeah.
I've seen it on I've seen it, but I haven't watched it.
Yeah. Or like Everything Everywhere All at Once, or any kind of movie where there's like connection, like mind connections across universes or around the world.
Yeah.
Like when they would do like the tilting camera effects, and like they would kind of like fly around. It's like this was happening in their minds, but they were like flying. Even the part where she was like flying over the earth. At first, I was like,
that was really cool.
Yeah, at first I was like, this is kind of dumb, but then I kind of got into it. I was like, wow, she's literally just flying around the world, like zooming in right she's where like she's trying to go. Yeah, it made me think of when I'm like looking for something, like where is that? And I go to Google Maps and I just like keep zooming in until I find what I'm looking for. This is me zooming in with my fingers.
It reminded me a lot of like the original X-Men movies when like Charles Xavier is searching for other mutants and he's looking over the globe of the earth. So he's like scanning and then he can hear them and then zoom in. Wow. That's, she's like scanning the earth for the shine. Like, wow. And then zooming in to find Abra. Yeah.
Yeah. The whole thing about like when she's like in the file cabinet, but then is it Abra or Abra? I don't what it.
Oh, I've been saying Abra, but it could be Abra.
I don't know. I thought like abracadabra, but whatever.
Cadabra.
But then she goes into the hat's mind, and so she's in this like cathedral library. I just thought the whole thing, how they would play with like one of them was standing at the window in her bedroom, the other one was standing at like the window of the freezer in the grocery store. Just the way they played with that like mind connection thing was kind of cool.
It was very cool, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I like that sort of thing. Like it's all like it's very it's very tied with like multiverse, which is kind of just what you just said, but because they're like connecting across planes of existence, like through this like mind universe, right? It is very interesting how they displayed it and how they portrayed it. It was pretty cool.
I just think it was kind of fun to watch. I also really liked the fact that the little girl Abra was powerful. Like she wasn't, and we talked about too when Dan Torrance was a kid in The Shining, how he's like good for him. He figured out how to like cover up his snowy footprints or whatever. It's like he's a little fighter,
right.
So I like that. I mean, it was almost dark because she's running around the maze, like slicing this chick's calves or whatever. But like, I liked that she wasn't a victim. She was like
Yeah.
the
She
most
was a badass.
powerful. She was a badass. Yeah, and I
She was
thought
a badass.
that was cool.
She was almost a bit reckless, but she was a badass.
Almost a bit reckless. Yeah.
Almost a bit reckless. But yeah, no, you're right. She was a good co-protagonist to
Danny.
grown up Ewan McGregor, right? Like she
Yeah.
served her character well enough because she was confident and she was outgoing and she was powerful.
Yeah.
And so, him using her to like sit on the counter and do the thing to lure those folks out, like it worked really well. And I guess I hadn't really thought about it, but when you're talking about, again, Ewan McGregor, who I love, by the way, to take someone so well seasoned like him and put him parallel, next to this little girl, she rose to the occasion. She did a great job.
I actually had a
she
bit
did
of a
good job.
crush on the villain, Rebecca Ferguson.
Oh, on Rose the Hat?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
she's
hat
great.
thing was kind of dumb. I'm sorry. I didn't love the whole. I don't know what was the deal with the hat. I guess I don't know.
I mean, what was dumb? What do you mean?
Like maybe just her look. Why was she the top hat?
You just didn't.
It kind of
Well,
felt
first
like
of all,
a comic book character.
It wasn't, but it wasn't really a top hat because top hats are like thinner and taller.
Oh, okay.
I think no, I don't know. I think so there were some online theories that I saw that hinted that there was like some sort of weird power associated to the hat because when the hat came off her head when she first had to run in with Abra when she was in the store, she like panicked to go pick up the hat when someone went to pick it up. She's like, don't touch that.
Yeah.
Which for everything else that was well explained, that wasn't. But also, that lady's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years.
She just has old-fashioned style. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
I just thought the hat thing made it
protect your head from the sun.
I just couldn't take it as seriously. But that's, I think, what was a little bit interesting about her as a character. First of all, Rebecca Ferguson is gorgeous. And so there's this like, what's the word that means like when you have like a disconnect in your brain, like a
disconnect.
Okay, yeah, I'll say that. There's this like disconnect between the fact that she's the villain, the bad guy, but she's also like beautiful and kind of like elegant, she has this like poise,
interesting,
and so
do you think that that's different because she's a woman? Because very handsome, suave men many times play a villain, and you don't ever hear anyone say that, or at least I don't. Because it's very common. You talk about like the suave guys that seem like the good guy and they're good looking and then they turn out to be the bad guy. That's like a real life like thing, where you can't trust someone based on their looks. So I'm wondering, but
people
also
tell me all the time
you had the same
I
reaction.
must be the bad guy.
Okay. First of all, no one's ever told you that. But you're too innocent. But you had the same feeling about Cyclops in the menu. That's not his name, but when he was being kind of a dick and you were like, yeah, but he's so adorable. What's his face? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And we admitted that it was kind of light and she didn't really take it serious, but and I didn't really argue with you, but you were just like, yeah, but he's so adorable and I love him for other things. And I was thinking, yeah, but if you didn't know that actor, you would have been like bashing him. So anyway, I just think it's funny. And that's why you don't have to answer the question, but I just think it's interesting that perspective.
It's not.
I think that many times our villains are played by attractive people, unless it's Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that the character isn't intimidating, and it's not that there isn't like this like heinous sense about her, or that she's not like powerful or dangerous. Like all of those things are true. I just. What did I think?
You just like her. You like her as an actress, so it's hard for you.
She's just so pretty. I just like watching her be evil.
Well, and what's interesting? I think that you're probably tapping into why some of the better scary movies don't have people that you know.
Because you associate them with other...
because I think that that's you watch Paranormal Activity, and if you had Brad Pitt be the guy doing it, it like disconnects you from like it just being someone. Now that's found footage. It's not exactly the same thing.
Oh yeah, that was the guy from Benjamin Button.
Yeah, exactly. So I wonder if I wonder if she was a stranger but equally looked the same, but you didn't know who she was. I wonder if you'd have the same effect. We'll never know. unless we go into a parallel universe and find out.
I
But
mean,
probably not today.
I mean, it was great. Like, she's very compelling in that character. The
Yeah.
other thing too that, and now I'm chipping away a little bit at this movie because there was things I like. Like I
Sure.
said, there were things I
'Cause you
liked. There were
hated
some
it.
things. No, I didn't hate it. There were some things though that I was just a little skeptical about. I never really. I always felt like Abra was good. Like, I mean, it sucks that she lost a family member, but I was like, it
Sure.
seems like she's in total control. Like, she never was out of. She did get kidnapped, but even then, I mean, it was like
Yeah.
she woke up and like 30 seconds later, she was like back in control of the situation. I just kind of always felt like,
No. Dan possessed her, and
well,
that's how.
true, yes, but like it didn't take long
Yeah.
for. It wasn't like, oh my god, what's going to happen to her? I'm so worried because it was like it wasn't very long before Dan showed up
Yeah.
and they did the whole thing and like bada bang, bada boom.
Yeah.
She was good. I just never was that worried for her. Do you know what I mean?
Which is interesting. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like-
You're saying that like it never actually made you feel
Like the villain was
worried
powerful.
for her character.
The
Yeah.
hat, Rose the Hat, was very powerful,
Yeah.
but every time they had a direct matchup, she always lost.
Yeah, but I think you're missing out on like what I was saying about her being careless. I think if Dan wouldn't have been there, she never would have been able to survive them. She was strong, but she was careless and she didn't know what she was up against. If all those people were after her and she had the pusher there and she had Rose connecting over distance and Crow Daddy, like she's powerful, but they would have overtaken her. It took their teamwork and her confidence played into that, her ability to just say, I'm going to do it. But she definitely represented like an overconfidence, like I'm so confident that, but I guess I wasn't really worried about her either, though. They didn't really make you worry about her. Like you never really thought she was in danger. It was more just the compelling storytelling of how they're going to take these people down. Now, also, it was kind of Dan Torrance's story, so I don't know how, not that I thought about this while watching it, but I don't know how they could have possibly killed her and then made it, that would have been dark. Can you imagine?
My point is just that I was like, they have the most powerful person on the good guys team already anyway.
Well, but remember when Rose like absorbed all the steam, she like superpowered herself.
Oh,
she powered up.
I guess so. Is that how that works?
But we didn't get to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was because that's like it makes her super like that's where they get their power from, is from steam sucking. But that's a weird term. Let's never say that again. But to your point though, we never saw her. Like she leveled up and then we didn't actually see it put to use. Because very quickly Dan released the ghost of the Overlook on her, and then that was it.
Yeah.
And then really, honestly, the person that Abra was most in danger from was Dan once the hotel took over.
Yeah, yes. Okay, so I feel like this is, I think, my final complaints about the movie, and then we can move on and talk about other things, is that
Sure.
It was a long movie, and the best parts all happened in the last like 20%. I would have rather they cut some of the like, we don't need to hear about the fact that you've been deer hunting before and you smelled it, and like we can maybe eliminate some of the steps that like got us into, and like the I would have wanted to see more battle between Danny and Rose the Hat in the end, maybe, or maybe another more twist with Abra, something there at the end that I think there was. I realized the nod to The Shining is that The Shining is long and slow and it's build up of tension, and I think that's what they were
Stephen
going
King's
for.
storytelling.
It's Stephen King's storytelling.
King is deep in storytelling.
Yeah, and like you said, they were trying to be true to the book, but
I wonder, because you're saying less build up, less storytelling, because like we're talking about like working through the trauma, finding, and it doesn't feel like a horror movie during those parts, but like it's like investigative. They're trying to find this body so they can do the thing. I never hated it. I thought that it was a long movie, but if it would have just been all the stuff at the end and a lot of fighting, I just felt like it would have lacked depth. Or it could have lacked depth, right? Because I think that one of the, there's a few different things that we're doing here, right? They're making a sequel to Shining. They're trying to make this horror movie. They're bringing the story in. But one of the big things is the path of Dan Torrance. This is his story, and you kind of needed to follow him through some like a
Oh,
path to get
there was
there.
the whole thing we didn't even talk about yet about the girl that
Yeah.
he hooked up with and her baby.
Yeah, that was kind of a one-off thing. Yeah. I wonder if he
Yeah.
ever called the cops and let them know that there were dead people in the
I
room.
don't know.
I guess that was just to show how low he'd gotten, you know,
Yeah.
like when he went to New Hampshire. That part was kind of rushed for as long as the rest of the movie was.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Interesting. That is interesting though. I think sometimes you don't really ever like the slow burn though. It was pretty long. I never felt disengaged from it. I also was watching it earlier in the morning. And so I don't know, I wasn't bored, but I also wasn't like excited about like watching the first
Yeah.
hour and 45 minutes just for the last 45 minutes to which you're right, like that's where the excitement came. Like, that's where it was more
Honestly,
exciting.
I was probably overthinking the entire time I was watching it. I was probably trying to figure out like what is this movie and what's it gonna be, and I was like wondering
That's
like
fair. Because it had a lot of things it was trying to be.
it did, and I was like obviously making connections to The Shining, and I was trying to piece
Mhm.
together like okay, what is The Shining and the whole steam thing, and they do a nice job of like kind of spoon feeding you a little bit of at a time of like what's happening.
Yeah.
But then like there's like the alcoholism and the trauma cycle thing, and then I kind of like the relationship between Uncle Dan and Abra, which by the way in the book
Yeah.
turns out they actually are related
They are related, yeah.
via
'Cause
his
father
half
was like
sister. Yeah, so the Uncle Dan thing
his
was a
father.
nod to that. I like that they had that cool like partnership through the chalkboard thing. That was kind of cool.
Yep. Yeah.
But I don't know. It was just a lot, and I was constantly thinking about the decisions they were making and what came from the movie, what maybe came from the book, and I might have just
That's
been
fair.
overthinking as I watched it, and then it got kind of tiresome.
And also, you had a lot of relatively slow time. So if you went in already overthinking about it, then you had time to
Exactly.
really think about it. Yeah, that's
Right,
fair.
right.
And I think that, I think I just went in just to like, hey, let's watch this and see what we feel.
Yeah.
Hi, Ewan McGregor. How you doing today?
Hi, Ewan.
We go way back.
Hi, Rebecca.
Me and old Ewan.
By the way, I have to say this cast connection
Mhm.
because I mentioned this in an earlier episode of Scary Movie Fright Night, but last year we
Mhm.
watched The Fall of the House of Usher, which was directed by
I don't know.
what's his name? This guy who directed this movie,
Oh, Mike Flanagan.
Mike
I still haven't
Flanagan,
seen that.
and Kylie Curran, who is Abra in Doctor Sleep, is a main character in Fall of the House of Usher, and that character,
Oh.
without giving too much away, is also very like competent and strong, much like the
Okay.
character in this movie. And she did a great job in that show as well. So as soon as I saw her in Doctor Sleep, I was like, "Oh, it's her."
Well, if you're doing character connections, then Violet, the girl who dies at the beginning.
Oh yes, I forgot about this. Sorry, I won't steal your thunder. You could tell everybody.
No, it's fine. I mean, I think we all know that it's the girl from Megan.
Yeah.
Not nearly as good of an actor as the girl that played Abra, but
well, I mean,
Violet.
She was only there for a little bit, and she got.
No, I mean, I meant in Megan. Like she was not. Her performance in Megan doesn't touch like Abra's in this one. But we also agreed that the kid that played Danny Torrance in the original, like, he might have them all beat because he was a young kid, being chased with an axe, and he held it together.
Another cast connection, really stretching it here, but Baseball Boy, goes on a few years later to play Flounder in The Little Mermaid and Luca in Luca.
Okay, there's no connection to anything there besides the fact that now we're just naming movies that other people have been in.
No.
Oh, well, no, Rose the Hat, it turns out, was in Mission Impossible.
Rose the Hat has been in a lot of things.
She
The Greatest Showman.
Yeah, exactly. This is The Greatest Show, which also had Ewan McGregor in it.
Oh, and
just
Dune?
Kidding.
She was in Dune?
She was in Dune, but she was in The Greatest Showman with Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. Wolverine knows Charles Xavier, who has the ability to scan the earth just like she did.
Also,
boom, mic drop.
Do you think Carrie has the shining? Or
no.
How do you say it?
She has
the shine?
No, she has the ability to move things with her mind. It's not the same thing.
Okay.
She doesn't shine. She
Shimmies.
puts her knives through her mom and hangs her and in the house before it goes down.
Yeah.
Last thing I want to ask you
Yeah.
about, because we didn't really talk about it. So, and I honestly, now it's been so long since we were talking about what this movie was about, but the knot, the vampiricness of them. What were your thoughts on it? I thought it was interesting.
The name of the group was The Knot.
The knot. I don't really know why.
Oh,
Probably because
okay.
they're all tied together.
Oh.
Yeah, I made that up.
What was the question? What did I think about them?
Yeah, well, I guess my point being is I thought it was clever because I saw them referred to as psychic vampires online. But I immediately felt like they were vampire-like. They feast off of blood, or they feast off of steam. Vampires feast off of blood. We watched them turn someone, right? And we obviously very recently did a vampire episode,
right?
But when they drain someone completely, they kill them. When they feed someone some of the steam, they turn them. Very similar to vampires. The way they swarm on people, the way that they like are hungry for the steam, and then of course like the way that it kind of gives them like
youth
and eternal life, effectively
long life.
Yeah, it definitely I mean it felt vampire-y, and so they did a good job of making it feel vampire. I don't know why necessarily, and even when the girl gets turned, she's like, am I a human anymore? And she was like, do you even care? Their eyes glow. So they were definitely something otherworldly of sorts, But anyway, it was kind of a weird one-off thing, and I just wasn't sure what you thought about it.
I actually, when Rose the Hat said, eat well and live long, I was like, this is good advice. This is a good life motto. I'm pretty sure I heard this on like Huberman Lab. Eat well and live long. I want to join the club.
That's your takeaway. Good job.
Yeah.
This is good.
I mean, I definitely got the same vampire vibes. The whole like you can eat them or turn them. Now I was curious, how do you choose? I'm guessing they're looking for people who can join the group who are capable.
Yeah.
But there's also something about the ages where like the younger you are, the more pure your steam is or something. So once you get a little old,
and I think that I think part of it, like with Abra, is that Rose was scared because Abra could overpower her because her friend Crow the monkey Crow guy, whatever the hell his name was, Crow Daddy
Crow,
Daddy Crow, he hinted that they could turn her, and Rose was like, negative. No, her steam's too strong. We need to feed on it. But like, I think there was some insecurity there of like, well, I'm the leader of this group. She could very quickly become the leader because she's too damn powerful. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just keep the group small enough so that you don't have to feed a big group. But if someone has an ability that you need, like the pusher, then you bring them into the fold.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I was gonna share some trivia about Stephen King. So, Dr. Sleep, the book, originated when someone asked Stephen King at a book signing for The Shining what happened to Danny Torrance when he grew up.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't have an answer. He was like, and then he would get that question, and so he then took that and turned it into the book. And I was reading some fun facts about Stephen King. He does a lot of his books start with a premise, like a what if blah 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 premise, and then he just expands
like Marvel
on that
what
idea.
if Stephen King style.
Yes. So like for example, what would happen if an alcoholic writer was stranded with his family in a haunted hotel? Boom, you have The Shining. What if someone could see the outcome of future events? That prompted his book The Dead Zone, if you've ever heard of that.
Okay.
I haven't heard of it.
Yeah.
Or what if someone could travel back in time to alter the course of history? That's a book he wrote, 11/22/63, about the JFK assassination.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah, they did I think it was like a mini series or something, or a series that they had on Netflix, I think, with James Franco.
Okay.
Yeah, he like goes back to try to stop the assassination of Kennedy or something.
Exactly. Yes. So what if scenarios? He also has he has a lot of characters that are authors. So in The Shining, Jack Torrance was a writer, if you
He
remember.
does. Yep.
And then
Yep.
some other examples are Salem's Lot.
Yep.
It is the main character. I've never seen it or read it, but Bill Denbrough.
Oh, one of them does become a writer. That is true. Yeah.
Did you know Stephen King has written some comic books? He's done.
I did not know that.
He's contributed. It says just a few pages to the X-Men comic book Heroes for Hope, starring the X-Men. He wrote an introduction to Batman number 400. He wrote a comic called American Vampire, a DC comic, co-written by Stephen King and Scott Snyder. And this will really blow your socks off.
Yeah.
Knock your socks off. What's the expression?
Same.
He's done.
Pull my socks off. These will really pull your socks off.
Pull your socks off. He's done some musicals. I think you told me when we talked about Carrie that there was a Carrie musical. Did you tell me that?
I didn't tell you that.
Maybe
no.
I told you that. Did I tell you that?
Yeah, there was an Evil Dead musical, but
oh, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Well, there was a Carrie musical which premiered in 1988.
Probably bloody awesome.
Yep. That would be so cool, huh? He also collaborated with several other writers on a music video for Michael Jackson, Ghosts, in 1996.
Oh, okay.
And he co-wrote the musical Ghost Brothers of Darkland County in 2012.
Interesting. Never heard of it. So it must have been a real banger.
Yeah, maybe one of these days we could do a theme for Scary Movie Fright Night, and the theme is musicals. Horror musicals.
I have no comment for future themes of this.
Oh, God.
Also, I feel like you opened my planning boards and looked at the future. But anyway.
Oh my God.
Moving on.
Are you doing musicals?
No, we're not doing musicals this next episode. That would be really funny though.
Oh.
But I had considered it. And I had a couple ideas.
Okay.
So maybe in the future. Now, actually, we were going to do it pretty soon, but now I'm going to have to push it down the road because now you're going to be thinking about it. I need to go back and wait until you're not expecting.
That's okay. Everything doesn't have to be a surprise.
Yeah, but your reactions are pretty priceless. So,
let's see. I had some more trivia about the movie, but I think we talked about all of it already. It just came up organically. But the last thing I'll say about Stephen King, I copied a quote of his that I thought was kind of cool, and I wanted to share it with you, especially because we have this question at the end of every episode around what type of scary movie is this movie, the horror, the gore, or the forget
the gross out, the horror, or the terror.
Terror, and I always mix them up. Terror and horror.
I'm gonna have you get a tattoo.
No, not of that. But I promise I'll study next time for this pop quiz. So when asked if fear is the main subject of all his works, Stephen King said,
"Yeah,
in every life, you get to a point where you have to deal with something that's inexplicable to you, whether it's the doctor saying you have cancer or a prank phone call. So whether you talk about ghosts or vampires or Nazi war criminals living down the block, we're still talking about the same thing, which is an intrusion of the extraordinary into ordinary life and how we deal with it. What that shows about our character and our interactions with others in the society we live in interests me a lot more than monsters and vampires and ghouls and ghosts." End quote. Which I think is interesting.
Oh, that's the end.
Yeah. Which I think was compelling to me because that's where I separate myself from like, oh, I'm never going to get possessed by a demon. I don't really care about this possession that's going on or whatever. But when I think about what he described as like the intrusion of the extraordinary into ordinary life, and that could be anything. It could be the possession of a demon, but it also could be, I don't know, like some of the things that we've talked about on this podcast, just that connection of like what fear is and what makes you feel fearful. I forgot what the beginning of the sentence was, but I just thought that was a really compelling quote. You know what I mean?
Cool. Are you going to get that tattooed?
No.
So then on that note, while you're talking about fearful Stephen King making the real life scary No, I think that's interesting. I think when you look at a lot of Stephen King stories, I think that's what makes them horrorful or terrorful or terrifying,
Right.
whatever. That's not a terrifying. Anyway, is like so many of his stories like bring out real life trauma and then add some sort of weird twistedness to it, right? They're deeper and darker, and it's mostly the darkness is coming from within someone.
Yeah.
Carrie's darkness is coming from her, like her
Abuse.
trauma.
Right.
The Shining, the darkness is coming from this house, but also there's a darkness within Jack Torrance, and it's unexplainable.
Yeah.
The Stand is, it's the end of the world, and the darkness is like the devil, but also there's darkness in humans, and the difference, yeah. But anyway, I think it's an interesting point. Obviously, I don't know all of Stephen King's works, but I know a fair amount for someone who's read very little of his books. But that's interesting.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So on that note, what do we think about this movie? I have an opinion, but like gross out, horror, terror. Obviously, the best of the best is a trifecta, which is what we said Talk to Me was.
There was a tiny bit of gross out with the hand crushed in the drawer. That was gross.
A little bit. And when they were running their hands like through her, her skin,
that was a little bit like
a little gross.
I think they were trying to go for when they would die and they would kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? They would like decompose and dissolve. Yeah.
I don't know. That just felt very Vampire in Sunlight to me. It didn't feel particularly
that's fair.
like
It wasn't really gross.
Yeah.
Definitely the horror elements, like everything in the hotel with the bloody elevator and seeing all of the ghosts and like there was a couple of jump scares. I guess that's terror.
No, that's a surprise. I don't think that really counts.
Oh, okay.
Because remember, terror is what your imagination brings.
And there was a lot of the like slow burn, like build up. And with the sound effects and the heartbeat and the
heartbeat.
So I guess that they were going for a little bit of terror.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know that I think that they hit it on the head with terror.
I agree.
I put some question marks next to that. I'm like, horror, yes. Gross out a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know that they ever reached terror. And I think the original one did. Less so for you because you saw it, 1,200 years time late. But I think that it reached the terror in that. This one, I didn't really feel it.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah. That's okay.
Not everything's perfect.
Not everything has to be super scary.
Question.
Yeah.
True. So then last question, you know what I'm going to ask you?
How scary was it?
Yeah.
I would say that this movie would have been really scary if I were 12.
5.
I would give it like we'll give it a 3. Just kind of a generous 3.
Well, I also listed it as a 3.
Oh, has this ever happened?
I mean, I think it has. I think it happened on the Scary Movies last season.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, it's never happened. It's the first time that we've ever agreed on a 3.
Yeah. That's impressive.
Yeah. I mean, now that we're on the same page, we can finally end this podcast. Thanks everyone for joining us for, 20 some episodes of Scary Movie Fright Night. We're done here. I'm moving on with my life. No?
Oh.
No? Keep it going?
Yeah, keep it going.
Oh, okay.
We got to pick the next episode, the next movie.
Oh, okay. Well, let's do that. Speaking of the times we've agreed on ratings before, I know you wanted to do a musical next time. Legitimately, I did have a musical on the slate. Now I'm going to move it around a little bit because now it just seems like I took your recommendation.
That's
but
okay.
next episode, you didn't get a lot of self-scare for this one. So next time we're going to circle back to paranormal horror.
Wow.
Embrace the self-scare. You said for 2024, this time around, I'm going to embrace the scare. I want to be scared. My name is Sam. I like ghosts. I want to be scared and I want to pee myself. You said all those words. I have it on audio recording.
Paranormal is what we gave last season. We gave a 10 on the scary scale to a paranormal movie. And then we gave an 11 out of 10 on the scary scale.
We did.
To a paranormal movie. So you're bringing the heat. All right.
Bringing the heat. Coming in hot. You ready for the first one?
Yeah.
Okay. But the difference is, of course, this is going to sound way more joyful than the movie likely will be. First movie. In a quaint family-owned morgue, a father-son duo discover an unexpected guest on their slab. A mysterious woman who turns the usually somber autopsy process into a bizarre and surprisingly amusing adventure. As they peel back layers of secrecy, the duo uncovers more than just anatomical mysteries. With a mix of laughter, suspense, and unexpected twists, this intriguing journey through the autopsy room proves that even in death, there's room for a little joy and a lot of surprises.
Okay, there's room for very little joy when we're talking autopsy in the morgue. I like how you're like,
What do you mean?
peeling back layers of secrecy. I don't want to see no layers of secrecy in the autopsy.
First of all, nope. Even in the autopsy room, there's room for joy and surprises, Sam. It says it in the synopsis.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like for paranormal horror, you owe it to yourself and for the listeners and to me to pick the one that sounds the worst.
All right.
Do you want to hear the second one?
Yeah.
Okay. In a world where the boundary between the living and the, well, other is as thin as a sheet of paranormal plastic wrap, a family finds themselves playing hide and ghost seek when their comically cute son discovers a knack for sleepwalking into the spirit realm.
Oh.
As their house becomes a supernatural playground, the family's journey to bring back their little sleepwalker takes them through a roller coaster of hilariously spooky twists and turns.
Oh. A roller coaster. It's like we're going to a little horror theme park.
Okay, now you're in the spirit. All I had to do was add the word of roller coaster.
Well, so this one
in
has...
a theme park where they dissect dead bodies.
Wait, is that what they said? No. They said they have a...
It's a roller coaster of dead people.
This one is a family. So we have fun family dynamics, playing hide and seek. And
hide and ghost seek.
Hide and ghost. Oh, that's cute. Hide and ghost seek.
Thanks. I didn't invent it, but...
And the kid gets... What did you say? Lost in the spirit realm?
Like trapped in the paranormal. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That could be fun. That sounds like...
Sure.
I told you I liked the whole like mind connection and other universes. It sounds like they're just playing a big, game of hide and seek with the spirits. Yeah.
It's like talk to me, but they pull them inside.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
What did you say? Supernatural playground? This movie sounds fun. Yeah. All right. That could be a candidate.
Okay.
What's our third one?
Sure. Third movie. In a delightful suburban neighborhood, meet our family, your typical bunch dealing with everyday quirks and eccentricities. When the secretive matriarch's unexpected departure prompts a series of eccentric events, the family embarks on a whimsical journey of self-discovery. Amidst strange occurrences and peculiar family traditions, they unravel the peculiar tapestry of their ancestry, leading to a surprising and comically twisted climax.
Oh, this one sounds like family drama. It's like
everyone and a twisted climax. Everyone loves a twisted climax.
The secretive matriarch and the what was it? It's giving Willy Wonka, eccentric, whimsical, comically twisted climax.
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
Are there Oompa Loompas in this movie?
There's definitely. In all three of these, to be honest. Except for in the first one, they're on the morgue table.
Okay, so we have morgue table, we have supernatural playground, and we have family secrets. Willy Wonka family secrets.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm trying to choose between the second one and the third one. I'm eliminating the autopsy one. Does those sound more fun and whimsical?
Real quick though.
Yeah,
but didn't we say that like for paranormal horror you should pick the one that sounds the scariest?
You're trying to sway my decision.
I am not. You said, "Oh, well, I don't like autopsies, so I'm going to get rid of that one because it doesn't sound fun." Anyway, go ahead. 2 and 3. What's next?
It's my choice. I get to choose our destiny. Let's go with number 3. Spill the
number
tea.
3 it is. The movie
this description uses the word eccentric twice.
It does. Well, that's because ChatGPT is unoriginal. So you'll be really happy with one note about this movie is it's directed and written by Ari Aster.
Midsommar.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a delay there. You forgot for a sec.
I did.
Yeah. You and I are real sharp today. We're both a little bit delayed. Sometimes the technology creates the delay.
Sometimes it's
our
just
brains.
right here. I might be getting, there might be somebody else coming in for a moment, just tapping in, like going through the file cabinet. Yep. What's going on in there? Not much.
That's probably.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Then they leave.
So this movie is called Hereditary. Came out in 2018. Written and directed by Ari Aster. Starring Toni Collette, Millie Shapiro, and Gabrielle Byrne. IMDb gave it a 7.3 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes a 90%. Funnily enough, the audience score only gave it a 70.
Oof.
I'm excited to rewatch this movie because I think that you're gonna love it.
This is
paranormal horror.
I have heard of that. I've seen that on lists of scary movies.
You have.
All right. Well, we have a movie.
So that's what we're going to watch. So thanks everyone for joining us today where we broke down Dr. Sleep. And while Sam almost fell asleep while I was retelling the story. It's okay though. We'll cut out your naps.
Thank you.
Take a minute, subscribe on Spotify, subscribe on Apple, head over to our YouTube channel and, subscribe there too. Do us a favor. You don't even have to watch it. Just press the follow button. And then consider leaving us a rating or review. Then go watch Hereditary and then tune in next time for Scary Movie Fright Night.
Shine on, everybody. Chris, do you think my shining powers worked on everybody? I told them they had to enjoy the episode.
Yeah, I didn't enjoy it, so it didn't work on me.
Oh,